Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, children and babies, mammals, rats, and dogs. I'm your host, Big Waz, of course, aka Wazi Lambre, joined as always by my comrade, the wonderful Nando Vila, on a special edition Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to you and yours, man. I know we got a lot to be thankful for, including our Lord and Savior, the liberal Lord and Savior, Joe Biden. on today's show, man, right before we hit record today, we lost a legend on the international soccer stage in Diego Maradona. We're going to eulogize that legend. Meant so much to the game, to the sport. Just the man, it's hard to even describe the guy's impact in the world of soccer. So we're going to talk about that. But first, Biden's transition just continues to chug along, Nando. He's starting to fill out the cabinet piece by piece. I know this is the third episode in a row, but these are the people that are going to...
This is the most important thing. Yeah, it's the most important thing right now.
These are the people that are going to shape the policies of the next 4 years. And more and more of these posts and these positions are starting to get filled out. We're going to start today on the financial side with the financial policy where Janet or Jeanette? It's Janet, right? Janet Yellen has been tapped to be the Treasury Secretary. Previously, she was the Fed chair under both Barry and Donald Trump from 2014 to 2018. She served as vice chair of the Fed from 2010 to 2014. And me and Nando were talking about this before the show, but she's considered to be on the quote-unquote progressive side on the economist tip. And for those of you who know, like, when it comes to these circles like economists and the Brookings Institute and all of these think tank type of people, just know that if you even have a whiff of socialism or actual progressivism in you, you're kicked out of the club. Nobody takes you fucking seriously.
You're excommunicated.
You're done. You don't even get to start. Okay, so just so you know, when people get called progressive in those circles, it's just the idea that you might be a Keynesian person, which essentially means that you believe that the government can step in and help the economy. Like, it's possible that the government...
You would have been considered mainstream boring in 1953.
Right. Right.
Before the economist kind of field went dramatically to the right.
Right. Just the idea that the government can step in and have positive impacts on the economy, which again, we know in 2020, we just watched the government give $4 trillion to the market, right? Like, so that idea is like the idea that it was antithetical to economic growth and health, that the government would do anything, that was a dominant mode of thinking for decades. And now those idiots have basically been like, yeah, what the fuck were we thinking? Obviously, the government can and should be stepping in to stimulate economic growth and health and whatever. Anyway, Janet Yellen she's your insider's insider. Of course, we knew that was going to be the case, right? Like, they would never even get a Warren in there as Treasury Secretary, right? And we know Warren is buddy with, financial interest and whatever, but she will at least be like, come on, guys, we can't be completely ridiculous and just monsters on financial issues. But they would never consider even a Warren. Even she's too outsidery for somebody in Joe Biden's position. But again, guys, we talk about it because, on this show, we're going to be seen as being Biden critics, and rightfully so. I think that's just who we are, and that's who we're going to fucking be. And it's because of decisions like this, right? He's never going to go outside the box for a position as important as Treasury Secretary, right? Yeah. And I think, honestly, if we're being honest, Nando, this is probably the best of that. What Biden's going to pick on Treasury Secretary. He could have went a lot worse than this, which is definitely an upside. But I want you to tell the people what the Janet Yellen sort of signals as Treasury pick.
Yeah. So, again, I know this is the third show in a row, I think, where we're
Of
talking about
course.
cabinet appointments. But I mean, again, personnel is policy.
Yep.
I mean, whatever. I mean, and especially in a Joe Biden administration.
Yes,
Let's be
right.
honest. I
I
mean,
mean,
the
the
man is
guy's
not.
not on his feet. Come on. It says it's
Yeah, he's gonna
obvious.
outsource a lot of the day to day to his team. He's not gonna be that involved. They're gonna let him sit in on some meetings every once in a while.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, Janet Yellen. Okay, so like you said, Janet Yellen is on the progressive side of the sort of acceptable mainstream economic profession. She ran the Fed chair, like she ran the Federal Reserve. She's not some radical. She's not, she's not going to seize the means of production anytime soon.
No.
But, um, but she's not Tim Geithner, who was Obama's pick in 2008, will go down as one of the worst Treasury secretaries of all time. Just absolutely critical role in the basically in the bailout of the banks on the backs of working people. That was Geithner, pushed it internally very, very hard. Actually fought a war internally within the within the Obama administration with Janet Yellen, who was, kind of around there as like under secretary of whatever, in the early days of the Obama administration, in terms of, how progressive the bailout should be, how progressive the stimulus should be. Janet Yellen wanted a much bigger stimulus than Tim Geithner or Larry Summers or these kind of figures wanted. And she lost that battle. And then she was kind of sent to the Federal Reserve as a way to like kind of get her out, because she was annoying to them. So they sent her to the Federal Reserve and she ended up becoming Federal Reserve Chair. Her role within the Federal Reserve as the chairwoman was a little disappointing in that, she had these progressive bona fides. Everyone was like, oh my God, like this was the one that wanted the bigger stimulus when Obama was around, and that would have been great. And then when she was at the Fed chair, she made one decision that was just absolutely catastrophic, which was, and this is kind of like complicated to explain, and it's like not really like that important to get into the nitty gritty, but like in 2015, toward the end of 2015, she raised interest rates, which is what the main Federal Reserve economic policy does. Like it just sets interest rates for the economy. She decided to raise interest rates as the economy was kind of recovering with Obama. And that slowed down the recovery, and it may have contributed greatly to the election of Donald Trump.
And by the way, we need to bring that up because it speaks to the mindset of these economists, right? There's this idea like, oh shit, the economy is going to be inflated and bloated if we keep these interest rates so low. Like it's just knee jerk. There's no data to back up what she's doing. It's just it's just dogma, honestly.
Yeah.
Like just the idea that keeping these interest rates low is going to fuck us up long term. It's going to kill us. It's so antiquated in its thinking, and that's why she did it. That's why it's important that we bring it up, because again, like some of these, they've been drilled at every step. And again, and I bring it up all the time. Yes, Janet Yellen is from Yale. That's where she learned how to be an economist, right? And those people think one way, and it's been drilled into them from the very start, right? So you see she ascends to power, and she's still holding on to these antiquated, ways of thinking about the economy, which is why I believe she did that.
Yeah. No, I mean, every single economist working today is traumatized by the experience of the 1970s, and they all, when there was like inflation and the government just couldn't figure out how to get inflation low, and then Paul Volcker came into the Fed and basically destroyed the economy to get inflation low. Like it's like one of the most dramatic and consequential policy moves in American history. Really, it just completely transformed the American economy for the worse. But they all learned the absolutely wrong lessons from the 1970s, and it's all kind of ingrained within them. On the flip side, Janet Yellen, the Treasury Department has huge leeway in terms of regulating Wall Street and the banks, and there's going to be, even if the Democrats win the two elections in Georgia, a 50-50 Senate, in which Joe Manchin and other kind of conservative Democrats control the balance of power. Like they're not going to pass anything meaningful in terms of stimulus. So like you have to have a Treasury Secretary who's going to be creative in the ways in which they can sort of circumvent essentially Congress to pass economic stimuluses and to deliver kind of things for working people. And Janet Yellen, within the realm of what we're talking about, you know, which again is not as much as we would like by any stretch of the imagination, is probably on the better side. You know, it could have been way worse, I guess is the way I'll put it. Like, it could have been way worse. We could have done a lot worse than Janet Yellen. You know, and the question is, like, will she rise to the moment? Will she see that, you know, we're in a crisis and you need to be aggressive, you need to do things to help people? And there's a prayer that she might.
That's to be determined. But and again, TBD. And so we're gonna tentatively put that up on the plus column, right, for the Biden transition.
Yeah. But then on the flip side, and this is like,
exactly.
On the flip side, and this is like classic Bidenism, right? For the Office of Management and Budget, which is a very important position, which basically coordinates the budgets of all the cabinets and kind of negotiates with Congress. Like, you know, it just kind of sets the budgets of all these kind of things of the government. He wants this guy named Bruce Reed. And Bruce Reed is a right-wing economist, essentially. Like, he's a very, very conservative economist. He's what's known as a deficit hawk, in which that the only important thing that the only important economic indicator, it's not poverty, it's not hunger, both of which are on the rise, it's the deficit. And the government has to do everything possible to reduce the deficit. This is a completely conservative worldview. There is no evidence that, you know,
that it matters. There's never been any evidence that this deficit matters in any meaningful way whatsoever.
Yeah. So all they do is basically cut social spending and to try to get the deficit down, which means they cut food stamps, they cut, you know, welfare, the things that working people rely on to survive.
But they never cut the military. They never cut the big ticket items. They only just cut the stuff.
And the reason why they won't cut the military, we'll talk about when we talk about foreign policy and why that always works. So this guy Bruce Reed is very, very conservative and would be an absolute disaster, like an absolute disaster if he became the head of ONB. And what we're seeing is what I think is going to be a new dynamic in the Joe Biden presidency era, which did not exist in the Obama presidency.
Because he's black.
No, or because there wasn't a left. No. I mean, there wasn't really.
It's both, though, man. Yeah. I think it's both. I think there was just this idea that, like, Barry was black, and so therefore he was hip, he was witty, he was radical. It's like, nah, son.
No, that's true. But, like, you know, when Obama named Geithner or, you know, Peter Orszag to run OMB or Larry Summers, like, yeah, there was some, like, kind of crusty lefties who were like, oh, you can't do that, that's bad. But, like, there wasn't any sort of meaningful power centers or anything like that. And I'm not saying that the left is, like, super powerful right now, but we are seeing people like AOC and Ilhan Omar, like, they're organizing to block someone like Bruce Reed, like their own president's, you know, cabinet appointee. That just would not have happened under Obama. Like, his own party was not going to, like, organize from the left to block one of his cabinet appointees. And that's going to be an interesting dynamic to see going forward, is, like, you know, will he be able to muscle through a Bruce Reed? Will he be able to muscle through someone like Rahm Emanuel, which, like, a bunch of elected leaders are already saying, like, no, this guy's a non-starter. He covered up the murder of Laquan McDonald when he was mayor of Chicago. Aside from, like, a million other awful things he's done throughout his entire life, like, a Democratic Party cannot allow a man like that to be involved.
What are you talking about? They Chuck Schumer put kente cloth on.
Yes, sure.
What do you mean? The Dems are for black people, duh. Like, they'll put the cloth on, but let Rahm Emanuel through for being absolutely disastrous. And, you know, another guy we got to get into, because, again, I want to remind the listeners, Nando, we got to keep reminding people, because we don't want to get ahead of our skis here. Yes, Janet Yellen is, generally speaking, a good pick for a Treasury Secretary. It's about as good as you can expect from the Biden camp, right? But the reason why it's hard to get excited about it, because he follows it with not just, you know, the Bruce Reeds of the world. Another guy under consideration for the National Economic Council is Brian Deese. And Our listeners need to know who Brian Deese is because he comes from where, Nando?
BlackRock, which was the largest hedge fund in the world.
Yes,
he's an executive at BlackRock.
Death Star hedge fund.
Yeah.
Joe Biden wants to put this dude on the National Economic Council because BlackRock they're just not doing the BlackRocks of the world. We need their opinion. They're not doing well enough.
They're not doing well.
They're not doing good enough.
Literally the largest hedge fund in the world. It's just like so crazy for me to think about that. Like the left party would name an executive from a hedge fund
like
BlackRock to run the Economic Council.
Here's the thing.
It's a signal to investors that, it's like, yeah, we got Yellen in there, we're not going to touch Bernie or Warren. Don't worry. We're not going to let them anywhere near any of this. We're going to put one of your guys in there. Everything's going to be fine. Let's ease the markets. That's what it is. It's a signal to investors that we're not going to do anything too crazy. Your bottom line is going to be fine. Again, it's what he told. It's what he told them behind closed doors, which was in leaked audio from a meeting with donors, investors. Nothing will fundamentally change. Brian Deese will ensure that nothing will fundamentally change.
It's just amazing. Like you really can't make it up. And again. Because the way that the Dems and the people who defend the Bidens of the world are gonna say this, is this idea that Brian Deese is he's an expert in financial issues. He knows everything. Like the guy, obviously, they're successful and rich at BlackRock, so they know everything about financial markets and the economy. Like these guys are geniuses. Duh. Of course, we're supposed to it's this fake ass meritocracy argument that they always fucking make, and the people with the most merits always come from the same fucking places. If you're not in those places, you can't possibly have the merits to work in the National Economic Council. That's the argument they make time and time and time again. And again, explain to me why BlackRock needs a seat at the table. They're already rich. They're already home. They're already the hugest hedgy in the history of fucking hedge funds. Like, what more do they need? I just don't understand. Like, they'll never be able to explain that level of thinking outside of, these are just my boys. These are the people who I care about more than anything else. They don't give a fuck about normal people, right? No. Like, you can't tell me Brian Deese knows what to do for the average fucking Joe Sixpack, who they claim to give a fuck about. You cannot tell me this man knows anything about that.
No.
But, it's not Trump, so it's supposed to be great, Nando.
Yeah.
You're supposed to feel great about Brian Deese. Yeah. You're supposed to feel great about BlackRock because it's not Trump.
Yeah. No, I mean, listen, the dynamic in American politics these days is that we have a frothing at the mouth, reactionary, insane party, that's the Republican Party, that is just fucking full of crazy people, and then a essentially pro Wall Street, pro Empire Party, which knows how to say the right words when it comes to transgender people and and might diversify the cabinet a little bit at the top, might have a black guy run HUD or something, and that's it. Those are the two options in American politics. It's just pro investor, pro Wall Street, or just insane, xenophobic nationalism, frothing at the mouth, and wanting to just murder people left and right. So,
and again, here's the thing, and we're gonna move on to the national security side of it, or what do we call foreign policy? Excuse me. They're gonna frame it as national security, but
they love
foreign
using
policy. They love that
security
term. The foreign policy side of it, and again, it's something we want to keep reminding our listeners. When you read the Post, when you read the Times, when you're watching MSNBC or CNN, you're going to get the talking points coming out of the Biden camp of, this is the most diverse cabinet
we're already seeing
you've ever seen, right? Essentially, we have the most BIPOC people ever and the most women ever, right? That's what they're framing as diversity. At no point will the discourse shift to, what about diversity of background? How many people, you can get me 20 people on corporate boards and make them as diverse, superficially, as you want. but like that's not actual diversity.
No.
Like there's nothing fundamentally.
They'll find the black guy who
different.
went to Harvard.
Exactly. They'll
That's
find
what they'll
the black
do.
guy.
That's what they always do.
Who worked on the board of Citigroup. Like they'll find that black guy. They'll find that brown guy. But like they'll never find the black person who wasn't part of that.
No.
Like they just will never do it. They refuse to do it because those black people aren't good enough for them. Bottom line, they're not fancy enough.
Or because those black people might actually care about people in their own class, right? You know, like they find the bourgeoisie, you know, like they find the people who care about their interests, you know, like they adjust diversity to them. They don't come to diversity, if that makes sense. Like they just train a few people to talk and think like them, and then include them in the inner circle and be like, look, we're diverse, you know, but like,
look,
no,
we got our blackie. We got one.
Yeah.
And so and look, and the reason, look, this is why we bring it up, right? Because I used to be one of those people who would recoil anytime I heard a conservative person say, well, liberals are the real racists. And I'd just be like, I mean, that's patently ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
But as I've gotten older and a little bit wiser to the ways of mainstream liberalism, it's kind of true.
Yeah.
It's sort of true. Like you do have to be a certain type of black person for them to find you appealing. Like it's true. It's fucking true. Anyway, we move on to the foreign policy side of the Biden picks. And I think I want to first start with Anthony John Blinken, baby. Blinken. Yeah. He served as U.S. Deputy Secretary of State under President Trump. He also worked as a national security advisor under President Obama. So he's got the bipartisan, and that's what and you already know that's what Biden and them is going to hit you with. He's got the bipartisan chops, right? He served under both fucking parties. This guy is unassailable. But talk to the people just a little bit, Nando, about Mr. Blinken.
So Blinken, so there's a concept in foreign policy called the blob. Okay, the blob means that in U.S. foreign policy circles, there is a remarkable amount of bipartisan agreement on basically everything. Like foreign policy is the realm of American politics in which there's like very basic agreements on essentially everything. Yeah. And the people who staff, you know, George W. Bush's administration more or less agree with everything that the people who staff the Obama administration. Like there's some small details, but the sort of fundamentals and the fundamental worldview is exactly the same. And it's called the blob, which is this idea that the United States can intervene whenever it wants, wherever it wants in the world for any reason, that the United States has to enforce countries to adopt certain economic programs for their own people, that you can fight sort of wars in smart ways, you know, like, you know, expanding the drone program and things like that. So there is just, and Tony Blinken, this guy, the guy who's going to be Secretary of State, is a member of the blob. Like he is 100% in the blob. He is just, you know, you don't even have to like know anything about him, but I could just name everything that he believes. I could predict it without ever speaking to him for 1 second. I mean, it's just, this is like the kind of training that these people undergo is that. And Blinken, for example, was Joe Biden's foreign policy advisor when he encouraged Joe Biden to vote for the Iraq War in 2002. So a vote which he still defends today. And Blinken was around when the Obama administration decided to intervene in Libya to depose Muammar Gaddafi, which turned Libya into a war zone and failed state and brought back the slave trade. And it's
still that to this day.
To this day. This was in 2011 when this happened. And 9 years later, it is just an absolute hellhole right now. And, you know, he's just one of these guys. And after he left the Obama administration, he went and cashed in, which is like, this is like the interesting kind of dynamic that's going on here. He founded a company called West Exec with Michelle Flournoy, who is the favorite to become Secretary of Defense. They want to do, they basically started a company together that helped companies like Facebook or Amazon or whomever get Defense Department contracts, get Pentagon contracts. And there's countless examples of them helping people like Boston Consulting Group or other just giant corporations just extract more money out of the public purse via Pentagon contracts. So again, these are people
and this is what they call classically the revolving door. The idea that you work in public office, soon as you get out, you go work it for the private interests, get a bunch of connections over there, and then you go back into the public office with those connections in hand, and you start doing their fucking bidding inevitably because they paid you a shit ton of money while you were working in the private sector. It's this disgusting, incestuous nature of how government works at these levels, right? Like this guy works for President Obama, starts a private company, becomes buddy-buddy with those private interests, and now guess what he's back doing? Working in the public sector.
Yeah.
And allegedly working on behalf of people like me and you. Yeah. Allegedly. But we know who they working
He's
on
already
behalf
gotten
of.
rich. Yeah, from the so that's why like the defense budget that's why the military budget will never be cut with people like this. I mean, that's why Barbara Lee, for example, the congresswoman from California, who was the only person to vote against the Afghanistan war 2 days after 9/11. Wow. And a vote that she was 100% correct to take. She voted because she realized that the authorization for the use of military force in 2001 was an open-ended invitation for endless wars all over the world. And she was correct about that. It was one of the most brave political acts anyone in American politics has taken ever, probably. 2 days after 9/11, she voted against the Afghanistan war, the only person to do it. She's still in Congress. She's like created this like bill or pledge that, anyone that works anyone that could be nominated to run the Defense Department or to run the State Department should not have any ties to private defense contractors. I mean, it just seems like a very obvious thing to people like me and you. To them, it seems like ridiculous that anyone would.
How could we find somebody who's good enough for this job who hasn't gotten rich from the defense contractors?
Right.
You can't be good at this job without that. It's like wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And so that's your boy Biden. That's his pick for that. Who else we got here? Oh yeah, we definitely got to get into Avril Haines because she's a woman, obviously.
Yeah, she's a woman. She's a
woman, so she's clearly progressive and clearly woke. Clearly, she's a woman, man. Oh, come on.
Yeah. Avril Haines, who God. So she's a CIA. She's in the CIA. She was in the CIA for a long time. She's a girl boss. She's gonna run the she's essentially
she's queen. Yes.
Yeah, she's Yas Queen. She's the chick
Drop
from
a
Zero
drone
Dark
on
30.
their asses. Slay, sis.
Slay, sis. Yeah, she for example, testified in favor of Gina Haspel when she became Trump's pick to run the CIA.
Of course.
She's a very hardened and well-trained deep state operative, and who the hell knows like what she's been up to back there. But I mean, but she's a woman, and that's like going to be like people are already celebrating, like the girl boss nature of it, and it's just like I don't know, like
and they're putting
it
up
makes
for
me
the
sound
CIA
like crass.
director post.
What? Sorry.
And she's getting put up for CIA director.
No, DNI, Director of National Intelligence.
Excuse me, Director of National Intelligence. My bad.
No, the guy that they're floating for CIA, and this is again another example of the new dynamic that's around in 2020 that didn't exist in 2008 under Obama, is that the guy that they're thinking for CIA is a guy named Mike Morell, who is a longtime CIA guy who has participated in the torture program and defended it publicly. Yep. He didn't even do the Obama we tortured some folks. He's like, no, we did it and it was good. It was good. It was great. Yep. So Senator Ron Wyden, who is like basically the most anti-torture senator we have, the guy who, was pro Snowden and all that stuff. He's already saying that he's going to do everything he can to block Mike
sabotage
Morell.
that dude.
Yeah, to sabotage. So like that's a dynamic that just didn't exist under Obama. If anything, it would be coming from the right on Obama, like that they would be like Democratic senators like Joe Lieberman and stuff blocking his appointments from the right, but not from the left. And that's a new dynamic. But yeah, again, Mike Morell, another just like CIA psychopath to run CIA. Avril Haines, oversaw I think she oversaw the CIA's internal investigation into like the torture thing, which was like obviously totally suppressed and all that stuff. Like, so yeah, just a girl boss. So again, with the big picture with Biden's foreign policy is that it's gonna be business as usual with a more competent hand at the wheel. It is a more competent management of the business of U.S. empire. The dirty, dirty, dirty business of U.S. empire will have people who can say the right words, who are stable, who won't do anything
and which in
rash.
a lot of ways is worse because it gives them cover to do every and anything. And that was kind of the sneaky dope part about Trump's bumbling and disorganized nature, is that it did ring alarm bells with people. People's like, this is disorganized. It doesn't seem like people. It gave people room, people that normally wouldn't even question it, to question it, right? Like you gotta ask the question, like, damn, that's a crazy big decision. Do we think these people are equipped to make those decisions? Now with Biden coming in, it's just going to be like, of course they know what they're doing. This guy strung 3, good sentences together on CNN or on the Sunday shows, right? Like, 'cause that's where they always go to make their cases for these fucking wars. They go to the Sunday shows and be like, in the hush tones, like, it's serious over there. We need to send serious people. We need to drop trillions of dollars on it. Yeah, let's go. Let's do it. So, again, we bring this up because these people are who are going to shape the policy of the Biden administration going forward. And so, we hope you guys would pay attention to that. And like Nando said, I think it is nice that there is a much more organized, it's not as robust as people like us would like, but a much more organized left to actually, AOC can go on CNN. Like she has the juice that she can go on NBC and make the negative case against these people instead of only the affirmative cases for these types of people. And so that's nice. It's a nice improvement. We'll see if anything can get done. All right, and so we move on, man. Today is November 25th, 2020. We lost the legend Diego Maradona, the legendary Argentine. He's why he's probably the only reason why Lionel Messi isn't universally recognized as the greatest Argentine, if not the greatest soccer player ever. Just because he was such a beloved cult figure. I watched the dope ass documentary that came out. I think it was last year or maybe this year. I don't even fucking remember. These days blend in so much. He's just a cult figure, but of course, Nando, I know soccer is your bag. And the world game is what you do. Just talk about Maradona and just what he meant, man, to the culture, bro.
Yeah, Maradona. It's hard to overstate what an icon he was. I mean, he was like on the Muhammad Ali, Jordan level in terms of like icon status. Like not just his play on the field, but like his ability to connect with people on some deeper level, some deeper emotional level, is what Maradona did. He was just so charismatic and just he had such a strange look too, and like everything about him, his name was like over the top.
Can you also talk about Nando, especially for the purposes of this show, where he's from? He's from the slums.
He's from the slums. He's from one of the poorest slums of Buenos Aires called Villa Fiorito, and it's he grew up in abject poverty. And he was a soccer phenom from when he was a child, and quickly kind of went up through the ranks at a club called Argentinos Juniors in Buenos Aires, and where he was just like amazing. People like they tell stories of when he was 13 and 14 years old of like people just coming to go and see him. Like it was already like known that he was just like this absolute phenom. And then he went to Boca Juniors, where he like absolutely exploded, and that's the biggest team in Argentina. And then from there he went to Barcelona, where he kind of struggled because he injuries. He actually got hepatitis. It was just like he had like kind of an ill-fated time at Barcelona, although he did play well when he was healthy. And then he ended up leaving and went to Napoli, which is again where he really crafted his legend outside of like his play with Argentina, where he won the World Cup in 1986, basically single-handedly, because that team was full of a bunch of bums. And he won that World Cup in maybe the greatest soccer performance of all time, like in terms of just like a pointed soccer performance. I mean, I was looking at some stats. You know, he completed like more dribbles than anyone, successful dribbles than anyone in the history of World Cups by like, he like shattered the record. Like the next person has like 40 fewer dribbles, which is like a lot. You know, he scored 5 goals and had 5 assists, which no one's ever done. You know, it was just really amazing, and he won the World Cup. But then at Napoli, which is a team in southern Italy, in Naples, which is in the south, which is important because the south of Italy is very poor compared to the north of Italy. Like, Italy's economy is like something like 80% kind of in the north, and the south is just kind of like run by the mafia and very poor, and the northerners are very racist towards southerners and things like that. So Maradona, when he came into Napoli, was like very much identified with their kind of working class struggle, like the fact that everyone in the north was against them. He like loved that, and he really inspired the entire city and took them to win 2 Italian championships, something which they had never done before and have not done since. They have no business competing against Juventus, AC Milan, Inter Milan, the big teams in the north, right, that win all the time. I mean, Maradona was up against an AC Milan team that had, you know, the great Dutch players like Van Basten and Gullit and Rijkaard and all these guys, and, you know, Maldini and Baresi, like just absolutely stacked with all the money in the world. They had, you know, he went up against Juventus, which is like the powerhouse club in Italy, the Platini and all these guys, and he won. He beat them with a kind of basically
ragtag group,
ragtag group. Like no one remembers any of the other players on his team, but he won 2 leagues, which is just a really hard thing to do, because it's not like in the NBA playoffs or even more so the NFL playoffs, where if you get hot at the right time, you know, you can kind of win. You know, if you get into the playoffs and you win a few games, a few lucky bounces.
This is over the course of a long season, you win this championship.
It's regularity, right? You know, like there is no playoffs. It's like whoever wins, gets the most points at the end of the season, sort of wins the league. So yeah, just an amazing figure. And then he, you know, as he kind of retired from soccer after just a very long career, he became a very outspoken political figure. And, you know, it's a little bit, I started thinking about it a lot when you were just talking about these people who are trained in the elite institutions, you know, like the diversity conversation. Like Maradona was not polished. He did not have the bourgeois kind of polite affect. He did not even have people around him. Like these days, like any soccer player, even if they come up poor, like they basically have a team of people around them that kind of protects them. Like Maradona like never had
agents and all of that.
Yeah, publicists, you know, they're media trained. Yep, you know, they know how to speak, you know, they know how to do the thing. They don't say anything interesting. Like Maradona never had any of that. And he never really developed that kind of polite way of speaking. He was always just kind of rough around the edges, like a working class, uneducated guy tends to be. But he had very strong ethical political commitments in that he very much supported the cause of anti-imperialism, especially in the Bush era in the United States. He really was a fierce critic of the Bush administration. He really much was an ally of the Latin American pink tide. He was very close to Fidel Castro, Hugo Chavez, you know, Evo Morales in Bolivia, who we've spoken about, you know, kind of very much allied himself with the struggle of working people around the world against the forces of power, imperialism, capitalism. And he did it in his own way. I mean, he wasn't, you know, he wasn't an intellectual. He wasn't, you know, he hadn't read the right books. He hadn't gone to the right classes, but he knew it in his bones.
Just in his bones. This is the right thing.
Yeah, he felt it. He grew up in it. He lived it, you know. So yeah, man, just a very kind of inspiring figure, and really like connects with people on such an emotional level. Like in Argentina, there's a church to Maradona. You know, the people get married at the church of Maradona. Like Argentines, like he will always be their number one. Like Messi is, you know, there he's got better numbers and things, but like he doesn't connect in the same way that Maradona does. Like one of the things that Maradona did, and that like I find to be, you know, just like maybe his greatest achievement, because if you look at his numbers, he doesn't have the sort of insane goal scoring numbers that Messi has. Also, he played slightly different style. Like he dropped in much deep. He was much more of a midfielder than Messi was very much focused on scoring goals. But the real thing is that when in Maradona thrived in under adversity. He thrived when his team wasn't as good. You know, he thrived when things were kind of going south, and then he had to be the guy to sort of lift them up. Messi is an amazing first chair violinist of the Vienna Philharmonic. You know, when in the context of a thing that's working well, he will take you to levels that are not
unseen, right?
Unseen. But if things start going south, he kind of tends to check out, which is what's happening this season. Barcelona is struggling this season. They have tons of problems, and Messi is clearly like, fuck you guys. I am fucking checked the fuck out. You know, Maradona would do the complete opposite. He would be like, I am not letting you guys, you know, lose. Like he was kind of Jordan-esque in that way, you know. Although again, Jordan played with great players around him. Maradona never really had a great team around him. He never, you know, you can't name one of his great teammates. Like none of them were all-time greats the way like Pippen or Rodman were. So yeah, just an amazing guy. I highly recommend people to watch the documentary on him by Asif Kapadia on HBO. There's tons of footage on YouTube these days. It's very easy to access this to see like just how amazing he was, like his just unbelievable ability to just get past people off the dribble. And, you know, I did a podcast about him for Gimlet Media called We Came to Win. There's an episode that's just all about Diego Maradona. I think it's a pretty good primer if you want to learn more about him and just how his career went. But yeah, a lot of ups and downs. He wasn't like, you know, it wasn't like sustained kind of unbelievable. It was a very much roller coaster ride, which is what made him a lot more interesting than someone like, you know, Cristiano Ronaldo or Messi, who are just kind of like robots of soccer.
I think what you're describing, man, is a public figure who was extremely human. And I say that in, like Nando was explaining, man, you get to a point, especially nowadays, where guys become uber famous and rightfully so, right? Like they shield themselves from the public. Like they don't want the public to get to know them. They don't want people to see their awards. They kind of want to do their job, go back and enjoy their fucking riches, which more power to you. I understand that. But I think the shit that resonates with people is when people do show their humanity, man. And that means the fuck ups too. Right. Yeah. That means not always saying, you know, racially sensitive things and not always speaking in a polished manner. And I think those type of people are the people that are always going to resonate and speak to the public in the most deepest sense because, you know, they're being human, honestly.
Yeah. Like we were joking before the broadcast, you said, you know, you pointed out Maradona did a bump of cocaine on a soccer field
on a
pitch in the middle of the game. You know, like he struggled with drugs his whole life. I mean, he really like once he got a taste of the coke. I mean, but there's stories of when he was at Napoli. I mean, he was like, yeah, I would go on a 2-day bender. You know, after the game, I'd basically party for 2 days, just coke out of my mind, rest for 2 days, and then train for 2 days and be ready for the game next weekend. You know, and like there's a certain type of person, a certain type of fan that gets very angry about that, and then there's a certain type of fan who's like, fuck yeah, that guy's the man.
He's living his life, man. He lived a full life, man. So cheers to the life of Diego Maradona, man. You'll never be forgotten. That's for sure. So, you know, we want to send a happy Thanksgiving to everybody who supports this show. Supports what we do at Count the Ding, supports what we do in our various other endeavors, man. It's incredible. It's kind of a dream that we get to do what we do for people. And so we want to thank you for that. And we hope even in this trying times that you guys are able to enjoy yourselves with your families, man, because this is what it's all about. Honestly, Thanksgiving is always my favorite holiday because it's the least empty of all of them, right? Like you spend time with the people who you love the most, eating, telling jokes, getting into arguments, crying, laughing. It's just, to me, it's the best time of year. It's my favorite holiday. And so I want to send a happy Thanksgiving to everybody who listens to the show. Of course, make sure you become a Patreon of Count the Dings at patreon.com/Count the Dings. Subscribe and listen to Let's Pod It Out, Nando's Entourage Recap Pod. Make sure you subscribe to The Athletic, all the shit we do, all the other stuff we do, man. Want to send a big shout out to the super producer, Rob Lopez. Appreciate everything you do for us over here, Rob. You the man for that. And so we'll see you guys next week, man. We out of here. Peace.
Love you.